what's going to be the dramatic conclusion, et cetera, all this cast of characters. And that's really how they made their comeback in the Trump era. It's not clear what would serve that same role this time around. Democrats in general are in disarray. There's no coherent view of how to oppose Donald Trump this time around either. So they're not all, oars are not all rowing in the same direction. So the only thing they can think to do is basically bring back in the one person that they know still has the trust of the audience and see if she can right the ship.
But the problem is with this strategy is she already left. So they probably had to pay her a boatload of money to come back for this 100 days. What about after that? Is the plan that, they'll find their footing? I mean, I'm assuming that's literally what it is. They're like, we'll figure it out. We'll see what the peg is.
Rebuild those viewership habits. That's what they're hoping. I don't either.
Because, it's really important to know. The media was not the creator of the resistance. It was like a dual pathway where, yes, MSNBC and all these other people invented Russiagate to feed the resistance, but the resistance was a thing. I was here in DC. There were people marching up and down the streets after Donald Trump won. The day after Trump won, I was at the Trump Hotel for a work thing, and the entire place was flooded with protesters. I remember the Women's March. It was impossible to even get around. This is what was it? 4 million people showed up here in Washington, D.C. Remember all those videos of ladies in their hats?
It was monumental.
On the planes. It was big. Yeah. It was big. All right, cringe, but big. But it was a thing. And there was clearly like a demand for that type of content. That's part of where it came from. This time, I don't see it as much.
No, not at all.
I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of people out there who don't like Trump or they want to see something a little bit different, but it's not like a 9/11 style event to them. And they're tired, or they've heard it all before. So that level of engagement, the illegitimacy that they viewed him as because he didn't win the popular vote, a lot of the arguments are just gone. And at this point, everything they possibly could have done has been tried. Arrest, the court cases, Michael Avenatti, Cohen. Even they are probably rolling their eyes at this point. No, they just have to say, I can't take this shit anymore.
I think it is that exhaustion. It's not that they're any less depressed about his victory. It's like we tried everything. Like, we were in the streets. We marched. We protested. Like, we watched Rachel Maddow every night. We tweeted about Trump. We did. He got arrested. He got charged. He did January 6th. And, people saw with their own eyes the extremism. And there was this mass revulsion against the actions that he took and the actions he didn't take on that day. And I think the sense is like, we did all that, and like none of it worked. And even we, managed to get Joe Biden out of the way and have a better chance at least at being able to succeed. So I think this time, and there's also, in 2016, he really felt like an aberration, especially because he didn't win the popular vote. And there were all these, Russia and Comey, and there were all these like, and Hillary runs a bad campaign, and maybe she was a uniquely bad candidate. And so there was this sense of this was a blip. And that's not the sense now. So there's not the same grassroots movement against him. And there's certainly not media that's orienting itself in order to, help to build up that grassroots energy movement of resistance, et cetera. And and then the other thing we haven't even mentioned is Comcast is selling MSNBC. Like, they're being cut loose along with other cable news properties that are under the Comcast brand. And they're being launched out into the ether as effectively a startup in the coming years. They're being cut loose from NBC, where that, provided them with some news gathering and some legitimate news gathering ability. So they're really at sea. And I do, like I said, the word that comes to mind for me looking at this, bringing Rachel back in for the first 100 days, is just desperate. It's the only thing they could figure to do to try to rebuild something so that when that spinoff does occur, they have, something of viewership, something that could even theoretically make sense as a business possibility. Because right now, given these numbers, it's not looking good. And they pay remember, huge overhead. I mean, the amount that they pay these Hosts
Oh, it's millions.
is
Yeah.
yeah,
I was just looking.
absolutely.
Pete Hegseth's financial disclosure. This guy only works weekends. He's getting paid $2.2 million a year. To only work 2 days a week.
It's a nice gig.
Must be nice,
Nice
you know.
gig.
And that's over at Fox News. Obviously, it's probably a little bit higher over there. But I mean, what? Cut it in half? $1 million?
I mean,
Rachel's pulling
Rachel
30
makes
million
that kind
a
of
year.
money, and
yeah.
Joe and Mika make that kind of money.
Oh, they make 10 million each.
Yeah,
Like
huge dollar figures. I mean, every primetime host is making at least $1 million.
Right.
A year. Rachel's making way more than that. Joe and Mika make way more than that. I mean, that's if you're a startup, like even they said they'd be a well-funded startup.
Yeah, right.
Even a well-funded startup can't handle that kind of overhead when you're not bringing in the viewers. So yeah, the future not looking great over there. This is not totally unexpected, but Semaphore broke the news. We can put this up on the screen. Chuck Todd has been meeting with Washington media organizations. He is going to leave NBC at the end of his contract. You know, he'd already been taken off Meet the Press, so not all that surprising that he is looking to move on. It wouldn't surprise me, Sagar, if he also tries to get into the independent media game, because that's it's the hot spot to be. These people all think that they can make it in our world. And I don't know, some of the ways that he's been talking recently have seemed to me to be an attempt to transition into more of like an independent media space, like giving some credence to Bernie Sanders, that kind of stuff, where it's very different from the way that he used to approach these topics. So
Chuck also
fancies
fancies himself intellectual. He likes to do
absolutely.
like big history takes.
Yeah.
So I could also see him trying to write some Bill O'Reilly style history books. That is, by the way, as a book guy, so depressing. Whenever you check the top 10 books in the United States, number 8 is always some fucking killing so-and-so by Bill O'Reilly. Who are you buying this? I just don't understand it. I think it's like grandmas who buy them as gifts for their grandsons.
So they've gotten ripped apart by fact checkers.
Look, put the accurate side
in there.
It's mostly the killing books are just like aggregators. It's like reading a BuzzFeed article about an event, like killing Lincoln, right? And it's like narrative style aggregation. I actually tried to read Killing Lincoln once because I was like, okay, what's all the fuss about? It's one of the top selling books in the country. It's incomprehensible and bad. I just don't get it. But for Chuck, there's a well-trodden path out there.
That's true.
There's a well-trodden path.
And he doesn't have the juice that Bill O'Reilly.
No, he doesn't.
Bill O'Reilly, listen, I don't share his politics.
Right.
He really is kind of the goat of like the cable news format.
Yeah.
That man really made, cable news what it is, like the format and his style and, his command of the audience and all that stuff. Like he really was. I have to respect the game. I have to respect the game.
I used to watch it growing up. What was it, the debate segments and that they used to have. I mean, listen, it was at one point, I think O'Reilly was commanding like 10 million viewers a night whenever we were in the lead up to the Iraq War. I mean, he honestly has a lot of responsibility for that, for a lot of the problems with the Bush administration. It was a different moment in time. It was almost 20 years ago. It feels like forever. But at one point in time, like these people were the kings of American politics. So at the very least, thank God that time is over.
Yes. Indeed. We've got one last piece here, which is more on the dismal television ratings and a new poll. We can put B3 up on the screen here. Americans exhausted by political news, TV ratings, and a new poll show they are tuning out. So about 2/3 of American adults say they have recently felt the need to limit media consumption about politics and government because of overload. You should probably do that. It's probably good for your health. Smaller percentages of Americans are limiting their intake of news about overseas conflicts, the economy, or climate change. 7 in 10 Democrats say they're stepping back from political news. Percentage isn't quite as high for Republicans, who have reason to celebrate Trump's victory, but still about 6 in 10 Republicans say they felt the need to take some time off too, and the share for independents is similar. Maybe, I don't know. People are bad at really describing like what they should do versus what they are doing, et cetera. The fact that cable news ratings are, CNN and MSNBC in particular, are massively down doesn't necessarily mean that news consumption overall is massively down, because as we discussed before, a bunch of like left independent channels are actually seeing a huge surge right now. Kyle's obviously being one of them. So I think there's a real, I'm sure there's some fatigue after an election. There already is, but it also seems to me like what we're seeing is more of a reshuffling of media habits than a desire to completely step away.
Yeah, no question. I totally agree with that. All right, let's get to Israel.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And